Hard to find words that really describe how wonderful our human bodies are. Words that come to me are things like stunning, breathtaking, highly complex, miraculous. As you know, our bodies are made up of a lot of different systems. We have the heart, the circulatory system. We have the reproductive system. We have the respiratory system, just to name a few of the many systems we have in our body. And they all have to work together to keep us alive. And when one system doesn't work so much, then it impacts all the other systems. We have 206 bones, and with that and about 600 muscles, that's what gives us our body's amazing ability to have motion, range of motion, for us to be able to go about and do things. But they all have to work together. And when one part breaks down, it impacts the other part. Even the psalmist understood this. In Psalm 139, listen to these words. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Fearfully and wonderfully made. Yes, that is exactly how I would best describe our human bodies. Genesis tells us in the first chapter that humans are created in God's image and that we are very good. In today's passage from Corinthians, the Apostle Paul tells the church at Corinth that we are the body of Christ. Paul is writing to them because as a new church and as new converts to this new faith, they seem to be struggling with exactly what that might mean. We can tell from earlier chapters that these new people in Corinth were what we might say behaving badly. So far in the letter, Paul dealt with issues like bad table manners when serving the Eucharist, immoral behavior, being unwilling to settle their differences among themselves, and so they were taking their conflicts to pagan courts instead of settling them among themselves. They were quarreling about spiritual gifts. Who had the most? Which ones were important? So Paul comes to this part of the letter where he gives the Corinthians a metaphor or a vision of what the church should look like. We as 21st century Christians are familiar with the metaphor that we are the body of Christ. If you've been in the church very long, you've heard that many, many times. But it's important for us to step back and understand how the first Corinthians heard it. In about the year 55 CE, or about 20 to 25 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. That's when we think this letter was written. You see, the metaphor of the body was not new at that time either. Other leaders had used the metaphor of the body to describe relationships between people in a completely different way. Prior to Paul's use, the metaphor had been used to describe relationships of inequality or subordination. People had used the metaphor to basically say, I'm the head and I'm the most important part, and you're just a toe or a toenail or a nose. And therefore, you're not as important as I am. So can you hear the way that Paul, like Jesus, takes a common story or metaphor and turns it around, flips it completely? He tells the Corinthians, using body imagery, that their various gifts are similar to human body parts. But he makes that dramatic change. One gift is not subordinate to the other. All are vitally important to the function of the church. Just as various body parts, all of them are important to the function of the human body. Paul's telling them as part of a body, metaphor, which should have been familiar to them, but with this new understanding, gifts of the Spirit, like gifts of the body, are all equally important. Paul's view of the church is that it is a community of partners. In the church, we are to find unity in our diversity and diversity in our community, not just within individual congregations, but with Christians and churches worldwide. One of the ways that this church is set apart from different churches are set apart from different other organizations is that we need to be about cooperation, not competition. You see, the Corinthians had been arguing about who is the best, who is the most important. There's at least two problems with that, at least in the church. One is it leads to arrogance and ego. I'm the best. This is what it sounds like. I'm the best. I don't need you. I have the highest amount of education. I make the most money. I have the most skills. And there's a problem with that. The other problem with that is it can come across as lack of self-esteem and lack of importance. That can sound like, yes, I'm not very useful around this place. I don't really have any gifts or skills to offer. Both of those positions can be a problem to unity and to diversity and to the health of the body of Christ. The body of Christ is like our human bodies, many different parts, each unique, each vitally important to the whole. And did you notice in this passage that Paul does not suggest they are the body of Christ? He proclaims it. He proclaims it as an already reality that already exists. We just need to start acting that way. You are the body of Christ, he says. It's not a suggestion. It's not a recommendation. It's a proclamation. And did you notice that Paul does not refer this metaphor to the church for discussion, review, support, or a vote? We are the body of Christ, a community of variously gifted people where we are all unique and different, with different skills and different talents, but all vitally important to the church. Paul even pushes this metaphor further when he says in verse 22, on the contrary, the members of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and those members of the body that we think less honorable, we clothe with greater honor, and our less respectable members are treated with greater respect, whereas our more respectable members do not need this. He really pushes that metaphor. The weaker members are indispensable. The body of Christ is a community of partners. It's a community that's called to be in partner not only with local congregations and communities, but across cultures and other denominations. Earlier this morning, I mentioned that today is a unique day in the church here. It's known as World Communion Sunday. It's celebrated on the first day of October, or the first Sunday of October, which happens to be the first day this year. World Communion Sunday was started in 1936 by the Presbyterians, and from the beginning, it was always intended to be a celebration across denominational lines, and that other churches would join in. In 1940, what is now known as the National Council of Churches became associated with World Communion Sunday and started promoting it to other denominations. It has grown over the decades, and it is widely celebrated around the world and across cultures and across denominations. It's a day when we celebrate our joy and our partnership with churches across the globe. We know that there are vast theological and cultural differences in various denominations, but today we celebrate with joy our shared ministry and our relationship to each other as the body of Christ. We share the bread and cup, the body and blood of Christ, remembering that just as each member of a local congregation has important gifts to share and to offer, so each congregation and denomination around the world has important gifts to share and offer. We are part of one holy Catholic and apostolic church worldwide. In Philippians, Paul says, I thank my God every time I remember you because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. That's what we're doing today. We gathered around the communion table with joy and thanksgiving, thanking God for our partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. And we go forth proclaiming our identity as the body of Christ. Amen.